Hi there once again and welcome to another Expresso mechanic tutorial, and this is the second of a three-part series on building a scissor lift. In part one we built the scissor mechanism and we got that running exactly as we wanted it to, and we got our top and bottom parts of the lift fully built and all working. And in this one we're focused on building the hydraulic ram assembly. So we're going to be building the ram and the push rod that connects to it. We're also going to be building this tube here which would carry hydraulic fluid to the actual cylinder, and then we'll create the little pump, and that'll just be a dummy object with a couple of objects put together there. There's nothing particularly clever about that, but anyway, that's what we're about in this tutorial. So without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. The first thing to do is build the cross members that are going to be used to support the hydraulic ram. To do that, we'll get a cube, start with that, and we'll make this 5 by 5, and we'll drop it into the outer struts and zero it out along the X and along the Z coordinates. And then we can just manually move it into position here. We've obviously got to centre it up as well, so it doesn't actually want to be here. It might actually be better to drop that into the base. If we drop it into the base, and then we can see where we are on the Z. If we make that 0, that's better. And now I can drop it into the outer struts. And then we can start thinking about changing its length. So let's have a look and see what we've got. Well, we've got a size there. We've got 200. If we make that something like, try 70, that's just within it. So it wants to go a little bit more. So let's just bring that to around 74. Let's have a look, see if that works. Going to our top view. Just look down upon this and see what's going on. Where are we? Just over here. Yeah, we're a little bit bigger than we need to be there. We can go to 70, probably about 72.5. Yeah, I think that would do. 72.5 looks as if it's going to work. So look, just have a double check. It might actually be a little bit further away. Make it 73.5. Yeah, 73.5 I think will be fine for that. Okay, that looks good. So if we just drop that down, we can, I mean, a lot of this is going to be done by eye. We're not going to be too special about how we do this. What we'll do is just rotate it. In fact, I'll go into my front view, and then we can focus on the object. Just take this back and change our display to lines and isopalms, and we'll just roughly line this up. It does not have to be perfect because we may make some adjustments later anyway. Another thing I will do is add a fillet to the cube. So let's just add a fillet, and again we'll make it 0.2, and it's consistent with everything else. So that's our bottom brace in the outer struts. We need to now make a copy of this and put it in the inner struts, and we'll do that next. Before I do that, I'm just going to go back into my front view and move the cube towards the bottom. I want it about there, somewhere around there. That'll be fine. And then we can simply hold down the command key and drag a copy of this out, and we can move it into position within the inner struts. And obviously we've got to change the length of it, but we'll move it into position first. So we'll place it somewhere here. And that should do fine. I'm not going to be too special, as I say, about this. I can easily make some adjustments afterwards, but somewhere around there should be okay. And if needs be, we can just rotate it back a little bit so that it's just pushing pushing towards the top of the lift. That'll be fine for that. And then again, I'll go into my top view and just do a double check on where we are with the actual size of the object. Let's have a look, see what we are. So yeah, we've got to come back within, and for a start we need our cube to be placed in the inner struts. That's where it needs to be grouped into. And this 75 or 73.5, we need to take that down probably to about 65. So look, it's just slightly too small, I think. Just move that. So look, it doesn't look as if it's perfectly in the middle, so let's just move that. Yeah, I mean, that's looking quite good. I think we're okay there. Yeah, I think we'll get away with that, and I think that looks pretty good to me. So that was 65.5 by 5 by 5. That's what we need in there. Okay, so that's our cross members in, and they're ready for the next stage. And for the next part of this, we're going to be making some brackets that will support the cylinder. Once again, we'll reach for a cube. And this time we're going to drop this into the outer struts beneath our cross member. And what I'll do, I'm just going to rename this cross member. And I'll do the same with this one. That avoids any confusion then. Okay, great. So our cube here then, we're ready to make this into the bottom bracket, and we'll start by resizing it. So in the X, we'll make it 4.5, 1 in the Y, and 4.5 in the Z. And what we'll do now is drop it into the cross member and zero it out. Go into our front view, so function 4, and we can see where it is. Now we also want to take that away for the minute, and then what we'll say, I think we can say minus 90. Yep, that's fine. And then we can eyeball this into position somewhere around there. Okay, so it's function 1 for our 3D view, O to zoom in on the object, and we can see what we're doing. So let's just zoom out a little bit so that we can see the object perfectly clearly. And this now, we can remove it from the cross member there, and we can make it editable by hitting C. We're in polygon mode, which is fine, and we've got visible only selected in our selection tool there, and I can just select this polygon at the end. At least I hope I can. Why am I not selecting that polygon? Tolerance selection, does that need to be selected? Yes, okay, fine. And we need to select this one here. That's interesting. I didn't realise if tolerance selection was turned off, you couldn't select anything. That's interesting. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind. Okay, great. So that's selected there, and we can then extrude. So D for extrude. And 1 centimetre should be fine, and it is. That will be fine for that, because these two are going to be extruded out to make the sidewalls of the bracket. And then we can hit D again and make a second extrusion. Click off that, and we can do a new transform, and we'll say 3 centimetres for this, and that's fine. That's the basic shape of our bracket sorted out, and there's no problems there. That's all looking good. So moving on from here, we can select this polygon and its neighbour here, and again D for extrude, and this time 4.5 should be fine. If we go into our front view again, so F4, we can see that this is perfectly square, which it needs to be. Once again, I'm going to select my selection tool, and this time uncheck visible only, and I can click here, and I've selected the side walls, both inner and outer, of the bracket, and then it's I for inset, and we'll go, we'll try a centimetre just as a starting point, and that should be fine. I mean, a centimetre looks really good for that. That should work beautifully. So the next thing to do, set my display to lines, MB for bridge, and we can bridge between those two and those two. And now we've made a whole in each of the walls of our bracket. Go back to garage shading and we can see that everything looks great. So that's the basic shape of our bracket made. The next thing to do is to hold down the Alt key and select subdivision surface and bring that in there. And now we're ready to start refining this and turning it into the correct shape to make the bracket. So we'll select edge selection, UL for loop selection, select this one and this over here, turn around and select these two. We'll also select that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, and I'll just go back into lines again. We'll select the bottom loop as well. And let's just go back to our standard garage shading, hold down the full stop key on the keyboard, click and drag, and we're fashioning it into shape. We just need to finish it off by selecting, let's have a look, see if we can do this. Can we select, well, we do want that one, but we also, that's the loop I want there. I also want its opposite number if I can get it to select. If I can't, I'll have to do it manually. That's selecting there. So those two we can now pull into shape. If I can select this one, if it will let me. It probably won't, so what I'll do is just do a standard selection there. I just need to select this one and pull that into shape. That's done that one. And its opposite number here. And pull that into shape. And we've got it. We've got our bracket. And that looks really nice. The only thing we need to do to finish it off is probably put a bevel on it, which we can do if I'll hold down shift and we'll do the necessary with that. Let's just select the bevel, drop that there, and if we just drop it there, we get the better shape, and then we can start working with the bevel. We just need to say 0.2 in the offset and 3 in the subdivisions, and we've got it perfect. Nice. Beautiful little bracket made. I'm not going to, again, I just won't bother putting the nuts on here to hold it on there. It's something you can do, as I say, if you wish to, but for what our purposes here, it's just not worth bothering with, really. So I'm going to leave it like that. So that's our bottom bracket made, and in our subdivision surface, I'm going to rename that bottom bracket. And that's great. And then all I need to do is copy that. And if I just command drag that down, and I can place it under the cross member there. And then all I'm going to do is move it along its y-axis there and go into my front view again. I'm going to turn it through 180 degrees. So I can say minus, let's just undo that a minute, put it back there, and I want to say, I think minus 180, and that turns it through 180 degrees there. Let's have a look, see what I've got. It might not be quite in the right place, it's not, so we can do some adjustment manually, that's okay. So let's have a look at that and just rotate that by eye. Again, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. As long as it's near enough, that's good enough. And then we can drop that back onto there. And that'll do. I think that's fine. That's great. That's in position. And we know that these two things are in exactly the same plane because I just moved it along the y-axis from this one. So they are absolutely centered and they're on the right plane. So that's fine. That's good. That's engineered well. Okay, so that's our top bracket. So let's rename that top bracket. Fantastic. So we've got our cross members in and we've got our top and bottom brackets in. And now we're ready to start the next stage, which is building the actual hydraulic cylinder. Yet again, we'll start with the cube. We'll resize this, just make it something like 4 by 4 by 4, just to make it a little bit more manageable. And then we'll drop this into the cross member of the outer strut, so the bottom cross member there, and we'll zero it out. And make that -90, because we know that that will be facing in the right direction. What I'll also do is rotate it, I think, 90 degrees. No, not 90 degrees there. Make it along the heading 90 degrees. That's it. I just wanted its Z-axis pointing in the direction that it will ultimately need to look, which is along the Z, because of course again we're going to be using target effectors here, target tags. Okay, so that's in the right position and it's facing the correct way. Let's just go into our front view, so F4, and then we can bring this up to around the center of the, well, if it needs to be the center of the hole, which is there, and that looks a good size for this. Actually, it's just going to our top view and look at this object, just see where it is. And it's a good size. It's a very good size. That's fine. There's a little bit of clearance around the bracket. That's okay. That's great. Right, so let's hit O to have a look at our objects and see where we are. Yep, I'm very happy with that. I think that looks really good. The next thing to do then is to hit C and make it editable. Grab our selection tool and go into our front view again, so F4, take off visible only, select that, and we can just switch it back on. And then we've selected our front and rear polygons there, and we can then hit I for inset, and let's go back into our front view again, so F4 again, and see where we are. We'll just apply 0.5 and see what that's like. It's not enough, so let's just tell you what we'll do. We'll just play around with this. That's too much. 0.5, take it back to there, and then we'll go a little bit more from there, and we can just do this until we think we've got it about right, which is going to be somewhere around there. If we can probably just move this a tad back to somewhere about there. I mean, it doesn't have to be 100% again. I mean, as long as it's near enough, it's good enough, and that looks pretty good to me. The next thing I'm going to do then is extrude. So D for extrude, and we'll go, let's go 1.2, see what we get there. Yeah, well, it could even go 1.3. Let's go 1.3. Yeah, 1.3 looks as if it's about right to me. That looks pretty good. Yes, it's just slightly proud. That's okay. And then from here, we can remove this cube from the cross member, hold down our Alt key, and select a subdivision surface and drop it into there. And then, as I did before, I'll switch to edge mode, UL for loop selection, and start selecting some loops of edges and start work from here. I need that inner edge in there as well. I need this one here, and this one here, and this one here. And then if I hold down my full stop key and click and drag, we'll get it to the correct shape. Let's have a look, see what we've got. Okay, that looks reasonably good. What I will do, I'll just hold down the command key and select these two edges here because I don't want those. And then I can go back into my front view, so F4, and we can start doing a little bit of work with scaling, because we can see that there's a gap here that we perhaps want to close. So let's see where we are. So yep, that's fine. Let's just do this until we get it somewhere around there, just a little bit beyond actually, because we can see that we can still move that cube a little bit in the Z to get it in the right place, which is around there. Somewhere around there looks as if it will work quite well for us. That should be okay. And let's see what we've got now. And yeah, I think that looks great. That looks as if that will work fine. Okay, so that's our first part of our cylinder created, and we can move on from here. So the next thing to do is select the top polygon. Let's go back into polygon mode. Select this one. I for inset, and we'll go something like 0.5, I think, for this. We don't want to go too far. D for extrude, we'll go 0.5. That looks reasonably good. Could go a little bit further, I think. So let's go 1. Yeah, 1 looks better to me. That looks as if that will work better. And then we can do inset, but this time we're going to go a bit further. We're going to go, I think, where are we? So let's try minus 3.5 and see what we get from there. That looks reasonably good. It looks reasonably good. It looks to be the kind of size that we're going to want for a hydraulic cylinder. Let's just zoom out a little bit. I'll tell you what, let's make it -3, -4. Let's go -4. And then D for extrude, 0.5. And then inset, and this time we'll go 0.5. And then D for extrude, 3 or 30. And that should give us the cylinder. That's looking, yeah, I think that's looking good. Size wise, that's looking very good. I think that should work for us. That should work fine for us. Right, so let's do a little bit more tidying up and make this a little bit more sculpted. Once again, we'll go into edge mode, UL. Select that loop, this one here, and this inner loop there. Hold down the full stop key and fashion those into the correct shape. That looks good. Yeah, that all looks nice. Very nice indeed. And then we can do exactly the same with our top edge loop, and we can fashion those into shape there. That's fine. Yeah, all looking good. So our cylinder's looking good so far. If we go back into polygon mode, we can then work with our top part of our cylinder. Again, we'll say inset and we'll go 0.5. That should be okay. D for extrude, and again I'll go 0.5. That's our first little part of it done. And then we'll think about doing a bevel, I think, on here next. That will be the next step. So it's MS for bevel, and let's just see what we've got in here. Now the offset looks a little bit too big. I'm going to go with, I'll try 3 in there, and we'll see what we get. Let's just go to the bottom here and just new transform. So let's see what we've got. So we've got, that's right, we've got 1 for the extrusion, we've got 2 in there. So let's try just bring this up to, yeah, 3 for that. I think is good. I think the offset I think should be 2. That's better. And the number of subdivisions, let's make that 4, just to give us a little bit more detail. So yeah, that looks good. There's one thing I don't like about it. We've got Fong breaks in there, which are not nice. We've got these sort of hard lines on the corners. What we can do there to get rid of those is go into the Fong tag and uncheck use Fong breaks. We don't want those used. That way we get a nice rounded shape, and that looks nice. Okay, good. That's great. So the next stage from here is to go into D for extrude. Yeah, 0.5 should be okay. We'll leave that. That's good. And then I for inset, and we'll inset by, yeah, 0.5 again. That looks good. And then D for extrude, and we'll simply say minus 0.5. And that brings it down into the cylinder there, and then we can simply delete that last polygon if we wish to, because we don't actually need it. Doesn't matter, we can leave it there or delete it, but I've chosen to delete it. But that's great. That looks really nice. So our cylinder is now complete, and we've got that done. And we can think about moving on from here and creating the push rod that connects with the cylinder. That will be our next port of call. You guessed it, we're going to reach for another cube. As I did before, I'm just going to make the size of this 4x4x4 as a starting point, and I'm going to group this cube into this cube here. I'm going to group that into there, and I'm going to zero its coordinates out. So it's in the correct place. I'm also going to have a look in my front view and check where the object is. Let's have a look, see what I've got. Okay, I need to zero this out in this particular plane, and I also need to make that 0 as well so that it's facing in the correct direction there, although in actual fact I'm going to turn that through 180 so that it's facing that way, because that's the direction that it will need to face in ultimately. I'm going to go into my top view and move this along to here. Now at the moment it's still in the subdivision surface, I don't want it in there. Let's take it out of there and we can place it, where are we? In the inner struts. It needs to go in the inner struts. So I need to place it just about there, will do for now. That's made it a cube again. Let's see where we are in our front view. Okay, there we have our object. Let's just make sure of where it is. It's not in the correct plane, so we just need to move it into position somewhere here, and we need to make some adjustments. Let's have a look. So we need to rotate it into the correct position, which is about there by eye, and then we can think about moving it just into its correct position there, and that looks pretty darn good. I think we're going to go with that for now. Okay, so let's just go into our top view, go into our object, make sure it's correct, and we can see that it is. It's all lining up nicely. So let's just check it in our 3D view, and yeah, once again we've got it exactly where we want it. Great, so the next step then is to make it editable. We'll switch to polygon mode, hit F4 for our front view again, and this time we'll select, and we've got the visible off, that's fine. We just need to select there, go back into our 3D view, F1, and we can see that we've selected the front and rear polygons, that's fine. So again, I'll go back to my front view and we'll hit I for inset and see where we are. Let's just apply that. 0.8's a bit too much. Let's just see what we can do with this. We don't want to go point. Let's just go back to 0.8 actually and work with the arrows from there. That's a bit too much. Let's go back the other way. Probably about point. Let's have a look, see where we are. 0.7. Try 0.71. No, I think a bit more. 0.75. That looks as if it might be okay as a starting point. And we can see that we need to do some adjustments to our cube. So let's just go back into object mode here, and just move this into place somewhere around there. That looks good. And we might need to move it up a tad, but not much, just one small little amount. That should be okay. And if we go back into our polygon mode now, we should be able to make some more adjustments if we need to. But that looks okay. I think that'll work for us. Let's just go into our 3D view again and hit D for extrude. We'll go 1.3, I think is what we used before. Yeah, that'll be fine. And then we can drop the cube into a subdivision surface. So Alt key held down and subdivision surface selected. We can then go back into our edge mode, UL for loop selection, and do as we did before. Let's just see where we are. Want the inner one there. Want that one and that one. Hold down the full stop key on my keyboard, click and drag, and we've created our shape. Let's have a look in the front view, so F4 again. Yeah, I'd say that was pretty spot on. That looks fine. So back to 3D view. Yeah, that looks great. Okay, so we've taken the first step towards making the push rod. Next thing to do from here, go back into polygon mode and our selection tool, put visibles only back on, select here, and then inner extrude, probably again 0.5 I think will be okay, and that looks good. And then all we need to do is D for extrude and go 30, and that should give us our push rod. Okay, that's looking good, looking fantastic. So as we did before, go back into edge mode, UL for loop selection, select this loop and this loop, full stop key, click and drag, and we've created the push rod. That's as much as we need to do for that. That looks great. So with our subdivision surface selected, and we can see that that's facing along the correct axis, so that when we use our target effectors it's going to work. We can now rename them. So we can rename this one push rod, and we can rename this one. We just select the object to be sure. We can call this hydraulic cylinder, and they're both ready to go. Drop that down there. In fact, we'll drop the brackets above just for the sake of being correct. Okay, that's good. Rightio, what have we got? So that's our push rod. They're in place. The next thing then that we need to do is think about giving them target tags and making them look at each other when things are moving, and that's what we're going to do next. Before we do that though, I think I've got an extra subdivision surface in here. That one is not needed, so I'll get rid of that. Okay, great. So with our hydraulic cylinder selected, what I'll do is come up to my tags, get a target tag from the animation menu there, and this needs to look at the push rod, and straight away it clicks into place. And then with the push rod selected, I'll give that a target tag, and this needs to look at the hydraulic cylinder. And now they're looking at each other correctly, and they should, if all things being fair, behave the way we want them to when the controller is selected and I move it. Let's see what we get. Let's just go into the user data controls and let's just have a go at that. Yeah, that looks good. It looks as if it's behaving. There's a little bit of lag, isn't there? There's some lag going on there that's not quite right. So we might need to do some adjustment to our... there's definitely lag. Definite lag there. Okay, so we need to do a little bit of adjustment. As before, this is actually quite simple to correct. All we need to do is select, or hold down my command key and select both of our target tags, and then all we need to do is change expression to generators, and now we should see that when we move the controller we don't get the lag and everything works as it should. Let's just take this to the top. Aha! So we've got another problem. Our cylinder and our arm are not quite long enough, so what we can do is just do a little bit of work with both of those. So with our cylinder, if we get a hold of our rectangular selection here, we don't want visibles only because we want all of the top. Then all we need to do is just bring those up to around, say, there, and then we'll do the same thing again with the push rod. So again, select the cube. We just want to select that bottom polygon there and bring that to there, and now we should find that everything works perfectly well. So let's just have a go with the controller, bring this down, everything's working as it should, nice and smooth down to the bottom. And let's just go into our front view and make sure that everything's okay, and we can see that it is. There's the push rod's going just to here, so that's working perfectly well. So let's just give that a go, bring it right up to the top. Perfect. I think we're working fine there. Great. So that completes the building of the hydraulic cylinder assembly there, and the next thing we need to do is think about adding the dummy object, which will be the motor and pump, and then we can think about adding the other bits and pieces. That should be fine. But before we go there, I seem to have inadvertently deleted the base plate here. So what I'm going to do is, where is my top? There's my top. So yeah, let's have a look at the base here. Yeah, the cubes disappeared that formed the base plate. So let's just copy this up into here. No, I don't want the controller as well. I just want the cubes. So I just copy that up into there. And then we can move it into position just by eye. Let's go into the front view. Select the object. What I'll do, for the sake of being correct, let's make it the correct way up. And I'll drop it into place down here, where it should be, which is about there. Yep. Okay, that's looking good. We've got it back in place. Yeah, that's looking okay. Yep, fine. Situation averted. Right, brilliant. So we've got that sorted out. Yep, so the next thing to do then is think about making the dummy object that's going to form the motor and pump, and then we'll think about putting the hydraulic or hydraulic fluid tube assembly in, and then that will complete everything. So you guessed it again, we're going to get another cube and we're going to make this one 14 by 14 by 8. That makes the pump, and we can position that somewhere around there. Again, by eye is fine for this. There's no absolute place where it needs to be positioned. Just go to our front view and zoom in on our object and make sure it's correctly positioned, which is around there. That should be okay. And we'll give this a fillet. We'll do the same thing as we did before, just make it 0.2 and leave it at 3 subdivisions. That's fine. And then moving on from here, we can get a cylinder. We'll make it plus Z in the orientation, and it wants to be, let's see what 10 looks like. Perhaps we'll make it 6 in that direction. I'll tell you what, let's swap those figures around. Let's make it 6 by 10. That looks as if it might be all right. And then we can drop that into the cube and zero it out. We won't bother zeroing it out in the Z. We'll just pull it into place. Let's just zoom in on the object to see where it is. Just put it into place somewhere around there. And we'll give the caps a fillet, and again we'll say 0.2, and that's the motor and pump ready. Then just to finish it off though, we do need another cylinder, so we'll grab another one of those, and this one we'll place into plus X, and we'll make it much smaller. Let's just go down to say 2 by around 5. Again, we'll drop it into the cube and we'll zero it out in the, we'll zero it out in the Z, we'll zero it out in the Y, and then we'll drag it into position somewhere around there. It's perhaps a little bit too long, so let's make it say 3. Yeah, 3 looks about right to me. That looks good. Just zoom in on that a little bit, and once again we'll give it a fillet and we'll say 0.2, and that should be fine for that. It just needs dragging into position to go into the front view, and we'll just make it drag it into position. We can put it like that if we wish to, but we'll leave it for what it is. Let's say there, that should be okay for what it is. It doesn't matter too much, it's only a dummy object, as I say. But anyway, that's the pump assembly complete and in position. Now, is it going to be in the way of the legs? It might be, I'm not absolutely sure. Just going to the top view, it might be that we need to just move it slightly because the motor might be in the way of the legs. I think it's going to get hit by the legs, isn't it? So what we'll do is move that so that it's within the legs there. Let's have a look, see what we get now. Let's just get the controller and move this down and see what we get. Just got to make sure it isn't being hit by anything. No, it doesn't appear to be, does it? It looks as if it's within the legs, and it all looks good to me. Yeah, that looks okay. Okay, great. So that's not gonna be in the way of anything. So the next step then is to think about making the tubing that the hydraulic fluid flows through. But before we move on to there, what I will do is select both of these, remove them from the cube, and then select all the items and group them. Call this pump assembly. And then I'll move this beneath the controller. Just move it down to there so it's out of the way. Great, so that's that done. And then before we build the actual cable, or I suppose the tube, the hydraulic fluid tube that needs to connect to the pump and the cylinder here, I will bring in another cylinder, set this up in the +Z orientation, make it 2 in the radius, 3 in the height, and in the caps again I'll give it a fillet of 0.2. And then we can move this into the cube of the hydraulic cylinder. Drop it in there. And then we can, in its coordinates, we can zero it out. And we can zero it out there. And then in our front view, so F4 again, we can position this accurately, so we can position it somewhere probably about there. And again, I'm not being too particular about this, I'm just sort of doing it by eye and doing what I think it should be. It should be somewhere around there, I think. Let's have a look. Yeah, that looks good to me. Now obviously I've made an object and it's intersecting with the cylinder. I mean, if you don't want to do that, you can do it with projecting a spline onto the actual hydraulic cylinder here, and then putting another circle spline above it, and then putting the two of them into a loft NURBS. If you want to go that far, you can, but for what it is, I just don't see the point. We might as well just do it like this. Okay, so that's all set up and ready, and the next step is to build the hydraulic fluid tubing, which will be used to connect the pump to the hydraulic cylinder. And in order to animate this, we're going to be using a Pose Morph. Let's get a hold of the controller and zero this out. Take it down to its closed position. Change the display to lines so that we've got a better idea of where everything is. And now I'm going to go into my top view, so function 2, and we'll take a look at where we are. So we're going to be building a spline then that's going to connect these two cylinders. So let's get the spline pen tool and start doing some work. We don't have to be too pedantic about this at first, but they do need to be soft interpolated. So I'll just drag out the tangents there, and I'll drag this one over here. Put this, say, over here. As I say, I don't need to be too pedantic about this at the moment. It's as long as it's looking something like a cable, well then that's fine. Put another one. I don't know, perhaps we just need, how many have we got? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. I'll put another one there. If I just take that back actually. If I can just put another one there and draw the spline tangents out of there so that that's soft as well. And then I'll hit my escape key, select this point and this point, and I think I'll just subdivide, so control and then subdivide, and then just put an extra point in there just to give it a little bit more, just a little bit more control over that and a little bit more roundness. Let's just make that like that. Okay, and I think we've got something that kind of resembles a good starting point for this. Let's just change to our front view, so F4, and obviously all the points at the moment are in the same plane. So what we can do, get a hold of our start point here, just escape, just get into the selection tool, that's what we need, and just move this until it lines up with the center of the cylinder. the cylinder that connects to the pump assembly there. Just go back into our 3D view, and then this one here, go back into the front view. We need to just bring that down slightly so that it lines up with approximately the center of our cylinder on our hydraulic cylinder there. And now what we can think about doing is selecting some of these other points. So if we select this one, and this one, and then go into our front view again and drop these down to somewhere near the base plate there, somewhere near there, and we can then see that this one isn't in the correct place. So we'll drop that down and think about moving just move it into a slightly better position there. Okay, great. That's got that done. Okay, so that's all looking nice. Let's have a look from this point of view and just see what we've got. Have we got something that's, yeah, that's not a bad starting point for this, is it? It looks quite good. Doesn't look too bad. So I think we could that could make a good starting point for us. I think that'll work quite nicely. The next step, if I just select my spline on its own, I don't want the controller selected. The next step is to come out of points mode and go into object mode here. And we can see that at the moment our spline's axes are nowhere near the spline. So we need to go into the axis tool here and move these into the position that they need to be placed in. Now, this is not in the center of the spline. It's not going to be somewhere here. What we actually need to do, if we go into our front view, we need to place these axes in the center of this pivot point. And this is going to be really important. What I'm going to do is just zoom in a little bit closer here. Just move this to the center and then zoom in so that I can see exactly where I'm positioning these, because it's very, very important that they go in the middle of this pivot point. So what I'm going to actually do is place the spline within the hydraulic cylinder. I'm just going to place it under the cube there, and then I'm going to zero these out so that they're there. Now, the spline itself is now zeroed. We want to also make it so that this is zeroed as well. The problem with that is that the actual spline itself is moving. We don't want that. So we want to do this independently, and we're not able to do that unless we do it by hand. So that's where we want the spline to be. That should be, it should be at 90 degrees. It's fine. I mean, that should be okay. It shouldn't be a problem. Let's just get a hold of our spline again. Yeah, I mean, that should be fine where it is now. It shouldn't be too bad at all. It's just perhaps wants to move this way a tad. Okay, that's fine. And then if we really want to, we can get a hold of all the points of our spline and move them. Or at least we could move just this center point. Actually, we don't need to move any other. We just get that one and move it to there. I think we're just moving the axes again. Just we want to move the actual points. Just select that point and just move that over until it's just about in the center there. That looks good. That looks fine. So okay, so we've got it all sorted out. We can take our spline back out of the hydraulic cylinder there and just leave it in position, and now it's where it needs to be. It doesn't matter that it's over here. If you want to, you can place it within this, but there's no real need to, because it needs to rotate around this Z axis, so that's no problem at all. You'll see why we've done it when we start using the Pose Morph. Okay, that's great. So that's the next little part of this setup complete. I'm just going to close my outer and inner struts for a minute and drop the spline down at the bottom of the pile there. I'll bring in a circle, put this above the spline and change its radius to 1 centimetre. Holding down my Alt key, I'll drop this into a sweep and put the spline underneath it, and we've got our tubing. So we'll rename the sweep tubing, and that's ready to go. Moving on from here, I'm going to bring in a null object and rename it target. Open up my outer struts and open up my hydraulic cylinder. Well, actually, it's already open. So I'll grab a hold of the target and drop it into the cylinder here. So it's going to be dropped into this object here, the outlet from the hydraulic cylinder. What we need to do now then is zero out the coordinates of the target. And then in the switch my top view, so F2, and then I'm going to just move this to around there. And we're going to be using this target to position the 5th point of our 6th point, actually. It's point, the index is 5 of this particular point. We're going to be using this to control the position of that particular point, because I don't want that point to be morphed. Okay, so that's why I'm doing this. So moving on from here then, I can select my spline, give it a programming tag Expresso, and I can bring in the spline, and at the output stage give it an object port. I can bring in a point node, add a point position at the input stage, and the point index I'm going to set to 5. Before I do anything else, I'm going to bring in my target, and at the output stage give it a global position. I can connect the global position to the, what happened there? I think I must have taken away the port. I don't know how I did that so fast. Global position, that's it. I can give that port to the point position, and I can connect my object. And now the last point of the spline is connected to the target object and is being controlled by it. And that should be taking its position from there. So if we now get the controller and we move it, you can see that the point is taking its position, but there's a lot of lag there. Now, in order to fix that, on this occasion, we don't need to change anything in this menu. It won't help us. What we do need to say is 400 here. And now when we move the controller, we should find that things are working the way they should be. And now there's no lag. It's strange. I don't quite understand the way all this works. I must admit the priority is a bit of a dark art to me. It's always a sort of trial and error thing. But that fixes it on this occasion, and that's working fine. Okay, so that's great. So the final step then for us is to create a pose morph and move the rest of the points. We probably won't move this point, obviously, because that's going to be fixed. But we'll move the rest of the points for using that pose morph and make our cable behave exactly as we want it to. I'll just close this window, and then we'll start looking at what we need to do. Now the spline, I originally said I wanted it, if I go into my front view, I said I wanted to rotate around this pivot point, but that's incorrect. What I actually need to do is move it over to here, because that's the pivot point that it needs to move around. So let's go into our axis mode and move this over here. And what I'll do is, in its coordinates, I can set its position Y to 0, it has moved the rest of the points because I've done that. It's funny that if I do it manually, it doesn't do it. But if I do it numerically, it does, which is very strange. You wouldn't think it would do it, but anyway, we'll do that. It doesn't matter. It's moved it slightly. It's not enough to worry about. But that should, if we zoom in, be in just about the right position. It just needs to move a little bit back to around there. That's perfectly good. So now our spline axis is positioned. Oops, don't want to do that. Now our spline axis is positioned correctly. We can move on from here. The next thing we need to do is select the spline itself and go into points mode, and let's have a look. So we've got a Bezier spline. That's not what we want, actually. We want a cubic spline. So we're going to have to do a little bit of remodeling to make this correct, but not too much. So let's hit F2 and go into the top view. And if we select this point and just, oops, don't want to do that. We're still in axis mode. If we move our point, what have we got here? Are we not in points? Yeah, we're in points mode, aren't we? Why are we not moving then? Let's just reselect that and see what happens. Select it. Ah, that's better. Okay. Right, so we can move that over to here and just probably move it up a little bit. And then get a hold of this point here and just move this over a little way, somewhere around there, and then make a few adjustments here. I mean, something like that is not looking too bad as a starting point for our tubing there. Let's just have a look in our side view, or our front view, I should say. Move this one. No, we'll leave that one as it is, I think. Let's have a look. It must be the next one. Just move that one up somewhere around there. That should be good. And yeah, that's giving us, that's giving us what we want. I mean, I would say that's a good starting point for our tubing. That looks perfectly good to me. So that's set that up and solved that little bit of a problem. The next thing we need to do is select these first 5 points. So they're all selected. And now we can say that we want to create a point selection. So we can store selection. And now we've got our point selection ready to go. Moving on from here, we can get our rigging tag, which is going to be a Pose Morph, and select that one. We know that we want to work with points, so we can check the box. Now, base pose is obviously this pose, the first pose that we've got here. We'll lock that pose. And then pose 0 is what we're ready to work on. In order to achieve this, we need to select our controller and bring it up to its maximum point. And now we're ready to start manipulating our spline. Okay, so we want to go into our Pose Morph, and we need to work with initially this point. I think if we just have a quick look round and see where we are. Right, okay, we need to, well, for a start, hang on. What have we got there? Why is the point not moving? That's ridiculous. Oh, I'm in the wrong pose. I need to be in my pose 0. Right, so we need to move that into position. It wants to be somewhere about, we'll leave it there for now. If we need to do any work with it, we can. We just pull it back a little bit, I think. If we just grab a hold of this point and bring that one to somewhere a little closer to the other point. Somewhere a little bit closer. Bring this one up so that it's about like that. That's what we want there. We want that nice curve. So we want this to curve. That's looking sort of okay for the second point at the moment. We'll just bring this one up, see what we get now. That's looking good. This one wants to come up as well so that we get that sort of effect. Let's have a quick look, see where we are. Yeah, we want a bit of weight, I think, here. So if we need to bring that, that's it. We want to bring that like that, and then bring this one down a little bit maybe. So we've got a bit of weight coming into it, and that's essential because obviously the tubing is carrying fluid, so it will actually have a bit of weight in it. So we want something like that, I think. And then bring that one back up again. Yeah, that looks good. There's a nice curve in that. And it's not 100% yet. Let's just go into our top view and see if we can do some work here. Just bring that over there, and this needs to be brought just there, say. Just got to get that nice curvature in it. I don't want any straight lines in this, really. Something like that. And then if we bring this one just this way a little bit, and possibly this way a little bit. Let's just do both at the same time. That's quite nice. We just need to move that one over to there so that we get that sort of effect. And then in our front view, let's just double check to see what we've got. Not too bad, but we need to increase that weight. So let's just drop this down there and drop this down here, somewhere there. I mean, that's a little bit high, that point, actually, but we probably shouldn't move it, but we will. But anyway, we'll drop it so that we got that sort of there, and perhaps drop that a little bit further. That should work. I think that's okay. I think that's okay. Go back into our 3D view and have a quick look at it. Yeah, I mean, that's not looking too bad. A little bit kinked there. I mean, a little bit tight. Let's just bring that out so that it just drops a little bit there. I mean, ideally, the cable should be exactly the same length in both poses, but it's very difficult to achieve that with splines. As long as you get it near enough is good enough, really. Yeah, that looks okay for pose 2. Okay, so in inclusion, we need to drop that in there so that we're working just with those points. Now, let's see if we do get anything if we go back into our tag and go into animate mode. If we do this, do we do anything? Yes, we do. So we're bringing our points back to their initial positions, but they're not at the moment behaving the way we want them to. So we need to go into edit, and we need to switch relative to rotational, and we need to change the y-axis to 0 and the z-axis to 1 centimetre. If we then go into animate, let's see what we get now. We should get a different result, and we do. You can see that we're getting a rotation, with that they're definitely rotating around the axis that I wanted them to rotate around, and this is correct. So now what we can do is use some more Expresso. And what we'll do, we'll put the Expresso on the tubing, and we'll get a hold of a programming Expresso tag. And then we'll do the next stage, and that will be the final part of this. Actually, something I've just realised, I'm just going to close this window for a minute. In the Pose Morph, if I go into the edit mode again, inclusion, I notice that I've got excluded here. Try included, and let's just see what happens there. This is very odd. I'm surprised that worked. Let's just go back into animate now and see what happens now when I do it. Yeah, isn't that bizarre? You wouldn't think that that would work, would you? That's really, really odd. You know, going into there and into there, and having that in exclude mode, it still worked. How bizarre. That's really weird. I don't understand that. That's very strange. But anyway, there you go. It still works. So we're all set up, and we know that we can do this and make it work. Brilliant, yeah. But there you go. So yes, we can open the Expresso again and continue working from here. Let's just bring that back over here. The first thing we need to do is bring in the controller, and we're going to use its user data. So we'll say controller in there. We'll use that user data to drive this. The next thing we need to bring in is a range mapper. So come down to calculate range mapper, bring one of those in, and we can plumb the controller's output into the range mapper's input. Our input lower needs to be minus 94.9. Our input upper minus 47.5. And we can leave the output lower and upper as they are. That's fine. They need to be between 0 and 1 because we're going to bring in our spline, or our splines Pose Morph, and we're going to use in the tag properties the Pose Naught Strength. So we'll connect those two there. So they're all connected and they're ready to go. Let's see what result we get with this. So if we select the controller and we move now we can see that yes, it's working. It's morphing between the two poses. But if we take a bit of a look at it, we can see that there's a point there that's lagging behind. Yeah, there's definitely a movement there that doesn't look natural. So how do we go about fixing this? Well, the key to it is within the range mapper. What we need to do is use the spline curve here to remap, and you can see that we're getting a remapping when we move these around. Now what we're going to do is take a hold of this point or the tangent of this point, and we're going to put it like this. So we're getting a cumulative curve sort of effect here, and then bring this one down a little bit. And then if we move the controller now, we get a much more natural result. It works almost smack on. I mean, there's still work to do probably to get it perfect, but you can see that that's very, very good. It's definitely working better. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll just put the display into Garage Shading Lines again, and we'll have a quick look and see what we can see when we see it work from this angle. So if we move it, yeah, you can see that it's behaving better. It's going to just get in the way there, but we'll just move that a bit. Yeah, you can see that that's working quite nicely. It's behaving pretty much in the way that you'd expect it to. So yeah, I mean, to me that's acceptable. It's acceptable. It's not 100% perfect, but as I said, you're the art director. You can do the work you want to make it the way you want to actually see it the way it pleases your eye. But that's essentially what we're about so far with this set of tutorials. We've achieved what we said we would set out to, and we've got our lift working completely now. All of our mechanisms are in and they're working as they need to, and it all looks quite beautiful, really. It's really nice. It's really nicely engineered and it works superbly, actually. So yeah, that's great. So that pretty much brings us to the end of this tutorial, and in part 3, and please join me in part 3, what we're going to be doing there is reaching for Python code, and we're going to be using it to create a control system for the lift. So we'll have some buttons here, we'll have a raise, lower and stop button, and they'll all interactively work with the lift when we run the timeline. So that's what we're going to be about in the third and final part of this series. So as I always say, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and if you have and you've learned something that's worthwhile from it, then please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and of course leave a comment and ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, please share the video, because all of this good stuff helps to keep the channel moving in the right direction. But anyway, that just about wraps this one up, so I'll see you very shortly on part 3.